Before the story begins, leave a comment to let us know where you're watching from. And if this content resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Now let's begin. Isabelle Hartley adjusted her second-hand dress for what felt like the 100th time as she stepped into the crystal ballroom of the Valemont Hotel. The champagne-colored fabric had once looked graceful in the dim lighting of her tiny apartment. But here, among a sea of designer gowns and impeccably tailored suits, she felt like a wild daisy among rare English roses. This wedding wasn't meant for her. Isabelle was only the +1 of her best friend Natalie, who had begged her to come. But the moment they arrived, Natalie had quickly disappeared to chase after the wedding photographer she was determined to meet. Isabelle wandered silently through the dazzling venue. White orchids cascaded like waterfalls from crystal vases, and the marble flooring probably cost more than her annual rent. Each step felt out of sync with the hum of conversations about ski trips in Switzerland, stock portfolios, and private golf clubs. In her hand was a card with elegantly embossed letters, Table 9. Tucked in the far corner behind a giant floral display, a table reserved for guests no one quite knew what to do with. But it was there, that something no one could have predicted would begin. Isabelle sat by the window seat, trying to look busy by nibbling at a strangely flavored salad and ignoring the hum of conversations that floated past her beach houses, real estate investments, lives so far from her own. Soft laughter clinking glasses. It was a symphony she didn't know how to play in. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" A warm baritone voice cut through her thoughts. She looked up and almost forgot how to breathe. The man before her wasn't like anyone she'd ever met. Tall, naturally poised, dressed in a finely tailored black tuxedo. His tousled dark hair was swept back but not stiff, and his eyes, an unusual shade of amber, were sharp yet unreadably deep. "No, please," Isabelle stammered, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. He sat down with surprising ease. A subtle cologne lingered in the air, not overpowering, but impossible to forget. "Julian Whitmore," he offered his hand. "And you are—" "Isabelle Hartley." She shook his hand, a touch that made her heart skip. "I came with a friend, but I think she's gone AWOL," she added, trying to sound composed. Julian chuckled, his gaze warm. "I can relate. I'm a groomsman, but I needed a breath of air. The bride's grandmother has been trying to set me up with a distant cousin and refuses to let go." Isabelle laughed aloud, her first real laugh that evening. She had no idea a chance conversation could make the world feel suddenly less distant. And she certainly didn't know that Julian Whitmore wasn't the kind of man one just happened to meet, nor one easily forgotten. As the music shifted to a soft ballad, couples slowly left their tables to gather on the dance floor. The lights dimmed, casting warm golden circles on the marble. Isabelle watched them, part wistful, part invisible. Dancing had never been her thing, much like belonging. "Would you like to dance?" Julian's voice brushed her ear like a breeze. She blinked. "I should warn you, I'm terrible at it. Good thing I'm not." He smiled, standing and offering his hand, eyes locked on hers. There was something in that gaze that made her forget how to say no. She placed her hand in his warmth, trailing from her fingertips straight to her chest. On the dance floor, under the dim glow, Julian rested a hand gently at her back, drawing her in not too close, but just enough for her to feel safe. He led effortlessly, each step melting her hesitation. "You're full of surprises, Isabelle Hartley," he whispered, breath tinged with wine and something undeniably real. "So, are you?" "Julian Whitmore," she replied, looking up into eyes that were steady, silent, and so sincere they made her heart falter. As the music faded, Isabelle realized something. They were no longer two strangers seated side by accident. She had just stepped into a story she never knew she was waiting for. Back at table 9, Isabelle sensed the shift. A few guests were glancing their way, not casual glances, but curious, even wary. Some women whispered, eyes flicking from Julian to her. A twinge of unease crept in. She turned to Julian. Julian, what exactly do you do? He hesitated, but his hand didn't let go of hers, firm yet gentle. It's a bit complicated. Try the simplest version. He glanced around the opulent room before returning to her gaze. I run a few companies, mostly tech. Nothing too interesting. But she was noticing things now, the limited edition watch on his wrist, the cut of his tuxedo, the deferential nods from staff. None of it screamed, just a groomsman. Are you famous? She asked softly. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Would that change how you see me? She looked straight at him, and for the first time saw something fragile behind the confident fear of being misunderstood. I don't know, she replied honestly. Depends. What kind of famous? Julian lowered his voice. The kind where people stop seeing you as human, just a symbol. She gave his hand a light squeeze. She didn't yet know who he really was, but in that moment she knew he wasn't lying. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the small window of Isabelle's apartment, but her heart was still floating somewhere between dream and reality. On her nightstand lay the business card Julian had given her, pure white minimalist bearing, only his name and a string of numbers. At exactly 10 a.m., her phone rang. Good morning, Isabelle. I hope you slept better than I did. Julian's voice came through gentle and warm like a morning jazz tune. I'm not sure I slept at all, Isabelle admitted, her heart still fluttering. Last night felt like a dream. Then let me prove it was real, Julian said. Have lunch with me. I'd love to, but it's Saturday, the busiest day at the flower shop. Then I'll pick you up at 7. Dinner. Dress comfortably. At the appointed time, a sleek black car pulled up in front of Rose and Fern. But it wasn't Julian driving, it was a sharply dressed man in a suit. Miss Hartley, I'm Thomas, Mr. Whitmore's driver. Please come in. As Isabelle stepped into the car, her heart pounded. She wasn't just stepping into a car, she was stepping into another world. Premium leather seats, a minibar tinted windows, and Julian waiting inside, dressed in a soft cotton shirt with a gentle smile. You have a personal driver? She asked, her voice nearly trembling. I do, Julian replied calmly. Is that a problem? No. I'm just trying to figure out who you really are. Julian leaned in, his eyes sincere. I'm still the man who sat next to you at table 9 last night, Isabelle. Everything else was just detail. The car glided down brightly lit boulevards into the city's most exclusive neighborhood. They stopped in front of a towering glass building. Isabelle looked up, the sunset reflected on the windows like gold foil. You live here, she whispered. Julian nodded, smiling. I don't just live here. I own it. The elevator opened directly into the apartment, or rather a sky-high space where the sky itself seemed within reach. A glass ceiling soared above, and the golden twilight poured in like velvet. Isabelle stepped inside, feeling as if she had walked into a painting she never imagined she'd touch. Julian poured 2 glasses of wine. His tone was as casual as if this were just any evening. I once said I run a few companies. Truth is, I own them. You don't just own this apartment, Isabelle asked, her wine glass trembling slightly. No, the whole building, and a few other places too. Isabelle set her glass down. She needed air, a grounding point in this too perfect room. Julian, who are you really? Julian sighed, draping his jacket over a chair. Julian Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Technologies, Whitmore Capital, and Whitmore Estate Group. I've done well. Maybe too well. She looked at him, not at the aura of success, but at the look in his eyes. And for the first time, she didn't see pride. She saw loneliness. You should have told me sooner. I was afraid it would stop you from seeing me as me. Isabelle was silent for a moment. Then she said, not harshly, just honestly, I'm a florist. I live in a tiny attic above a cafe. I wear second-hand clothes, and my world doesn't look like this. Julian stepped closer, his gaze never leaving her. But last night, sitting beside you at table 9 for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself. He held out his hand, not urgently, not demanding. You may not be used to my world, Isabelle, but if you let me, I'd like to learn how to step into yours. Before Isabelle could respond, a soft chime rang and the elevator doors opened once again. Stepping out was an elegant woman with a presence so composed it seemed to shrink the room around her. She had auburn hair styled in soft waves, a perfectly tailored cream blazer, and the discerning eyes of someone well-versed in billion-dollar gatherings. Julian, you missed dinner with the Harringtons, the woman said, her tone gentle yet laced with reproach. Then her eyes landed on Isabelle. Oh, you have company. A flicker of surprise, then immediately a polite smile. I'm Victoria Julian's sister. Isabelle rose, trying to stay composed. I'm Isabelle Hartley. Victoria nodded, stepping in with the grace of someone who had lived her life between politics and power. I've heard of you, she said, then turned to Julian, her voice light but sharp. He's been talking about you all morning. No money, no focus, no time. 3 meetings canceled. Mother nearly lost her mind, Victoria Julian warned. Relax, little brother. Just stating facts. She turned back to Isabelle, her voice a touch softer. Julian is usually very private. Your being here is unprecedented. Isabelle felt her cheeks flush. She stood up. I think I should go. No. Julian stepped forward, gently taking her hand. Please don't let this scare you. She looked into his eyes and saw something that felt almost like pleading. Yes, I have money. My life is complicated, but what I feel for you is real. Isabelle took a deep breath. She didn't know what to believe, only that her heart was swaying with every look, every word. I'll take her home, Julian said firmly to Victoria. Victoria nodded, saying nothing more. But just before the elevator doors closed, Isabelle caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. Not skepticism, but empathy. 3 days passed after the evening at the penthouse. Isabelle didn't respond to any messages or calls, but Julian didn't pressure her. Only one message was sent. Let's spend a weekend with just us. No schedules, no public gaze. Just you, me, and the truth. Isabelle hesitated, but in the end she called back and whispered, I need to know who you are without everything else around you. On Saturday morning, Julian came to pick her up himself. No luxury car, no driver, just an old sedan and him in a t-shirt and jeans, no platinum watch, no expensive cologne. They left the city driving north. After 2 hours, they arrived at a wooden lakeside cabin, simple, peaceful, a world away from the glitz Julian once inhabited. "I bought this place to remind myself I'm still just a person," he said as he helped her with her bags. "No internet, no signal, only what's real." They cooked together. Julian admitted he was terrible in the kitchen, but was joyfully clumsy. They strolled through pine forests, sat at the dock watching the still lake. And in those quiet moments, Julian shared about his childhood, where success was a duty, not a choice. "I didn't choose to be famous," he said as the sunset fell. "I just got good too early, and then no one cared to know the real me." Isabelle didn't say anything. She just held his hand tighter. That night, under a sky full of stars, as Julian held her hand and sang "Can't Help Falling in Love" off-key, Isabelle realized she was no longer afraid of his wealth. She was only afraid of losing the man beside her who had learned to take off his mask for her. A week after their lakeside trip, just as things seemed calm, Julian spoke up. "This Friday, there's a charity gala for children's education. It's for an organization I co-founded, and I want you to come with me." Isabelle hesitated. She had never stepped into that world where every gaze was discerning, where dresses, lineage, and reputation were all scrutinized. "I don't know what to wear, what to say, or even where to stand." Julian took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Just be by my side. Everything else doesn't matter." That evening, a personal stylist arrived with 3 evening gowns, all elegant, yet maintaining the grace Isabelle loved. She chose a deep navy dress, simple but refined, with her hair in a low bun and plum red lips. When Julian came to pick her up, he paused for a few seconds. "You don't need to try to be anyone else, but tonight you'll make the whole world stop." The gala was held at the City Art Museum. Soft golden lights, majestic glass domes, each step echoing with whispers. All eyes turned to them. But Julian didn't let go of her hand for a second. He introduced her to wealthy elites, tycoons, and politicians. And when asked about her work, Julian didn't flinch. "She's an artist, a florist. But more than that, she understands the beauty of emotion. No apologies, no embarrassment." He was proud. At the end of the evening, Victoria, the same woman who had once seemed guarded, approached. "You're different when you're with her," she said. "Softer. You smile more real." Julian stayed silent, watching Isabelle laughing with some elderly guests. "She reminds me of who I was, before everything became too big." Victoria nodded. "Good for you. But are you sure you're what's good for her?" That question, gentle yet cutting, lingered in Julian's mind the rest of the night. 1 week after the gala, Julian made a suggestion. "I've stepped into your world. Now let me understand more of where you come from." Isabelle smiled and nodded. That Saturday morning, Julian showed up at Rose and Fern, no suit, no flash. Just a rolled-up white shirt and worn sneakers. Lily, Isabelle's co-worker, whistled when she saw him. "Oh, look, Prince Charming in the flesh." Julian laughed, but he didn't just stand around. He rolled up his sleeves, wiped water, cut stems, and learned floral design from scratch. When a little girl came into the shop asking for pink roses for her grandmother, he knelt down to listen like her words mattered more than any boardroom meeting. That afternoon, Isabelle took him to her favorite pizza joint. No fancy service, just scratched wooden tables, bare brick walls, and an old owner who knew everyone's orders by heart. Julian devoured the greasy slice like it was gourmet, then eagerly played arcade games with the kids in the corner. "This is really you, Isabelle," whispered as they walked home in the cool evening. No, Julian gently corrected. This is me when I'm with you. You help me remember the better parts of myself I'd forgotten. But those peaceful moments didn't last. The following week in a board meeting, Richard, a longtime partner, walked into Julian's office, closed the door, and said quietly, "Julian, the stuff about the flower girl, it's starting to hit the press. They're asking questions. Our stock doesn't like rumors." Julian looked up. "That's my personal life. Julian, you know better than anyone your life has never been personal. I'm sure she's great, but she doesn't belong in this world. Don't let a few months of feelings ruin an empire." Julian clenched his fist. "It's not a few months. It's love." Richard paused, looked into Julian's eyes for the first time, and realized he wasn't joking. 6 months had passed since they met at Table 9. The love between Isabelle and Julian was no longer a mystery. They had learned to share both their differences and their silences. Some mornings she woke up in the penthouse overlooking the city. Some evenings he tied flower bouquets with her in the lavender-scented shop. Julian knew clearly he no longer wanted a life without her, and he chose the place where it all began to say the most important words of his life. That Saturday afternoon, they returned to the lake cabin. Isabelle thought it was just another quick getaway, but when she stepped onto the familiar wooden dock, she froze. The entire dock was lit with hundreds of tiny twinkling lights like stars. White roses lined the wooden railings. The lake mirrored the indigo sky like a painting needing no filter. Julian turned and took her hand. "I used to sit alone at weddings, just playing the role of the successful man. Then you walked in, not sparkling, not loud, but you changed everything inside me." He knelt down. Opening a small velvet box inside was a simple, elegant ring, understated yet perfectly crafted. "You're not the woman I dreamed of marrying. You're the woman I can't not marry. You made me believe love doesn't need to be perfect, just brave." Isabelle Hartley. "Will you be my wife?" Isabelle burst into tears. She didn't need to think. "Yes, I will." As Julian slipped the ring on her finger, the entire lake seemed to reflect a dream finally come true. 1 year after the fateful wedding where everything began, Isabelle Hartley stepped into the same grand hall, but this time she didn't arrive quietly. She didn't sit at Table 9. She didn't hide behind a large flower pot. Today, she was the bride. In a simple yet elegant white gown, her hair in a neat low bun adorned with a white orchid arranged by Lily, her close friend and co-worker Isabelle walked down the white aisle, sunlight streaming through the tall glass windows. And at the end of that aisle stood Julian. His eyes never left her for a second. Victoria stood beside her as a maid of honor, no longer the reserved woman from their first meeting, but a sincere sister who had witnessed her brother's love grow every day. In the front row sat Lily and the old friends from Rose and Fern, all beaming because they knew the once quiet girl from rainy days had now blossomed on her own. In his vows, Julian's voice trembled. "You are the greatest journey of my life. The place I found myself again. The peaceful shore after years of constant motion." Isabelle replied, her voice shaky, but her eyes steady. "You didn't rescue me from the life I had. You helped me build a life I never dared to dream of. With you, I don't have to shine. I just have to show up and be seen." When they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the hall erupted in applause. But for Isabelle, all sound faded, leaving only the heartbeat of the man who had chosen to truly see her. When the rest of the world looked away, because sometimes the most beautiful love stories don't begin with fireworks, but with a quiet table, a sincere glance, and a hand brave enough to reach out. And she, the girl who once thought she'd never be truly noticed, had become someone impossible to overlook. Not because she changed to fit someone else's world, but because she had found the courage to believe. She deserved to be loved.